The rain came down in sheets, turning the Seattle streets into rivers of gray. Eleanor Price stood under the awning of a closed bookstore, shivering in her thin cardigan, watching her bus pull away from the curb. She'd missed it by seconds, her arthritic knees no match for the sprint required. At 73, Eleanor had learned to accept small disappointments with grace. The next bus wouldn't come for another 40 minutes, and she'd be soaked by the time she got home. Her groceries, 2 meager bags from the discount store, grew heavier in her tired arms. She'd spent exactly $27, all she could spare from her monthly Social Security check after rent, utilities, and her heart medication. The medication that kept getting more expensive despite her fixed income getting smaller. A car splashed through a puddle nearby, sending a wave of cold water over her worn shoes. Eleanor closed her eyes, fighting the tears that threatened. She refused to cry on public streets. She'd maintained her dignity through worse than this. "Excuse me, ma'am?" Eleanor opened her eyes to find a young man standing before her, maybe 30 years old, holding an umbrella. He wore a hospital orderly uniform under a rain jacket, his name tag reading Michael Torres. "You look like you could use this more than I do," Michael said, offering her the umbrella. "I'm just heading into my building right there." He pointed to an apartment complex half a block away. "Oh, I couldn't possibly," Eleanor protested. "You'll need it." "I'll be fine. It's just a few steps. Please take it." Something in his kind eyes made Eleanor's resistance crumble. "That's very generous of you. Could I get your address to return it?" Michael smiled. "Don't worry about it. Just pass the kindness forward when you get the chance." He pressed the umbrella into her hand and jogged toward his building, getting thoroughly soaked in the process. Eleanor stood there, stunned, holding an umbrella that felt like it weighed nothing and meant everything. That night, alone in her studio apartment, Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about the young man's kindness. Such a small gesture, but it had been months since anyone had shown her that kind of consideration, maybe longer. She noticed his name tag had included his full name and the hospital where he worked. Swedish Medical Center, night shift. The next morning, Eleanor walked to the hospital with the umbrella and a plate of her homemade cookies, the kind her late husband had always loved. It seemed like a small thank you for such a simple act. At the information desk, she asked for Michael Torres. "He just finished his shift," the receptionist said, "but I can page him if it's important." "Oh no, don't bother him. Could you just give him these when you see him?" The receptionist smiled at the plate of cookies and the umbrella. "I will. Can I tell him who they're from?" "Just someone he helped in the rain." Eleanor left, feeling lighter than she had in months. 2 days later, Eleanor's phone rang. She rarely received calls anymore except from bill collectors or scammers. "Hello? Hi, is this Eleanor? This is Michael Torres from the hospital. I got your cookies and umbrella and I wanted to thank you. You really didn't have to do that." "You didn't have to give me your umbrella either," Eleanor said warmly. "But I'm glad you did. It saved me from pneumonia, I'm sure." They talked for a few minutes, an easy conversation that felt natural despite being strangers. Before hanging up, Michael mentioned something that would change both their lives. "I couldn't help but notice you were shopping at the discount grocery. I volunteer at a community food bank on Saturdays. If you ever need anything, please come by. No judgment, no paperwork, just neighbors helping neighbors." Eleanor's pride bristled initially, but something in Michael's voice wasn't pity. It was genuine care. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I might take you up on that." That Saturday, Eleanor visited the food bank. Michael was there, sorting donations and helping families load groceries. When he saw her, his face lit up. "Eleanor, I'm so glad you came." He helped her select items, chatting easily about nothing important and everything that mattered. Eleanor left with 2 weeks' worth of groceries and something more valuable: the beginning of a friendship. Over the following months, their unlikely friendship deepened. Michael would stop by Eleanor's apartment after his night shifts, bringing coffee and pastries. Eleanor would have dinner ready, grateful for the company and conversation. She learned that Michael was a single father to a 7-year-old daughter named Sophia. His wife had died 3 years earlier from cancer, leaving him to raise their daughter alone while working night shifts at the hospital. "My mother used to help," Michael explained one evening over Eleanor's pot roast. "But she moved back to Mexico last year to care for my grandmother. It's been hard managing everything alone." "Where's Sophia now?" Eleanor asked. "With a babysitter I can barely afford. It kills me that she spends so much time with strangers instead of family." An idea formed in Eleanor's mind. "What if she stayed with me, after school until you get home? I have nothing but time and I'd love the company." Michael looked up, surprise and hope warring on his face. "Eleanor, I couldn't ask you to do that." "You're not asking, I'm offering. Michael, you gave me an umbrella when you didn't have to. You helped me find dignity at that food bank instead of shame. Let me give something back. Let me be Sophia's grandmother, since mine is an ocean away and hers is in heaven." Michael's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." The next week, Michael brought Sophia to meet Eleanor. The little girl was shy at first, hiding behind her father's legs. But Eleanor had made her famous chocolate chip cookies, and within minutes, Sophia was sitting at the small kitchen table, chattering about her day at school. "Do you really want to spend time with a grumpy old lady?" Eleanor asked with a smile. Sophia looked at her seriously. "You don't seem grumpy. You seem nice, and you make good cookies." "Well then, we're going to get along just fine." The arrangement transformed all 3 of their lives. Sophia spent every afternoon and evening at Eleanor's apartment. They did homework together, Eleanor surprising herself with how much she remembered from her years as a librarian. They cooked together, Eleanor teaching Sophia the recipes her own grandmother had taught her decades ago. Eleanor helped Sophia with her reading, patiently working through difficult words. Sophia helped Eleanor with technology, teaching her how to video chat and send text messages. For Michael, knowing his daughter was safe and loved meant he could focus at work without the constant anxiety that had plagued him for years. He saved money on babysitters and spent his days off with his daughter instead of collapsing from exhaustion. For Eleanor, the loneliness that had been slowly killing her disappeared. She had purpose again. Someone needed her. Someone wanted her stories and her wisdom and her time. 6 months after the umbrella incident, Eleanor collapsed in her apartment. Sophia, doing homework at the kitchen table, immediately called 911 just as Eleanor had taught her. At the hospital, doctors discovered Eleanor's heart condition had worsened. The medication she'd been skipping to afford groceries had finally caught up with her. Michael sat by her bedside, holding her hand. "Why didn't you tell me you weren't taking your medication?" "I didn't want to be a burden," Eleanor whispered. "A burden?" "Eleanor, you're family. You've given us everything. Let us help you now." Michael organized a fundraiser through the hospital staff and the food bank volunteers. Within 2 weeks, they'd raised enough money to cover Eleanor's medication for an entire year. The community she'd quietly served through her kindness to Michael and Sophia rallied around her. But more than the money, Eleanor received something else. Dozens of cards and letters from people whose lives she'd touched. Parents thanking her for the after-school care she'd arranged through the food bank. Elderly neighbors she'd checked on during cold snaps. Young people she'd tutored in reading at the library years ago who still remembered her patience and encouragement. "I had no idea," Eleanor said, tears streaming down her face as she read the letters. "I never knew any of it mattered." "Everything matters," Michael said gently. "Every small kindness ripples outward. You taught me that." When Eleanor was released from the hospital, she returned to an apartment that had been cleaned and stocked with groceries by volunteers. Sophia had made a welcome home banner that stretched across the living room. "We were so worried about you, Miss Eleanor," Sophia said, hugging her carefully. "Please don't scare us like that again." "I'll do my best, sweetheart," Eleanor promised. Over the following year, their unconventional family grew stronger. Eleanor officially became Sophia's guardian during Michael's work hours, with paperwork and everything. Michael insisted on paying her, but Eleanor refused. "You gave me an umbrella," she said simply. "I'm just passing the kindness forward." On Sophia's 8th birthday, Eleanor did something she'd been planning for months. She invited Michael and Sophia for dinner, but this time, she had an announcement. "I've been thinking about the future," Eleanor said carefully. "I'm 74 years old. I'm healthier now thanks to you both, but I'm realistic. I won't be here forever." "Eleanor," Michael started, but she held up her hand. "Please, let me finish. I've been to see a lawyer. I'm leaving this apartment to you, Michael. It's paid off, has been for 20 years. When I'm gone, you and Sophia will have a home without rent. Maybe that will help you work fewer hours, spend more time with your daughter." Michael stared at her, speechless. Sophia looked between them, sensing the weight of the moment without fully understanding it. "I can't accept that," Michael finally said. "Yes, you can, and you will. Because I have no other family, and you two are my family now. This is what family does. They take care of each other." "All because I gave you an umbrella," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "All because you saw someone who needed help, and you helped," Eleanor corrected, "without asking what you'd get in return. That's the kind of person you are. That's the kind of person I want Sophia to become. And that's the kind of person I got to be again because of you." 3 years later, Eleanor passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 77 years old and had spent her final years surrounded by love instead of loneliness. At her funeral, Michael stood to speak, holding Sophia's hand tightly. "Eleanor Price taught me that kindness isn't measured by the size of the gesture," he said, his voice carrying through the small church filled with the community she'd touched. "It's measured by the intention behind it." 3 years ago, I gave her an umbrella because it seemed like the right thing to do. She gave me back a family. She gave my daughter a grandmother. She gave us both a home. He paused, composing himself. "Eleanor used to say she was just passing forward the kindness I showed her, but the truth is, we were passing it back and forth between us, building something bigger with each exchange. That's what love is. That's what community is. Small acts of kindness, repeated over and over, until they become the foundation of something unbreakable." Sophia, now 10 years old, stepped forward and placed an umbrella on Eleanor's casket. The same umbrella Michael had given Eleanor all those years ago. "Thank you for teaching my dad that kindness is never wasted," Sophia said softly. "And thank you for teaching me that family isn't just who you're born to. It's who you choose to love." After the funeral, people approached Michael with their own stories of Eleanor's quiet kindness. The neighbor whose snow she'd shoveled every winter. The young mother at the food bank she'd helped apply for assistance. The teenager she'd tutored in reading who was now in college. Each story was small, each gesture simple. But together, they painted a picture of a life lived in service to others, one umbrella at a time. 5 years after Eleanor's death, Michael stood in front of a new community center, about to cut the ribbon at its opening. The Eleanor Price Community Center, funded by donations raised in her name, would provide after-school care, food assistance, and senior services. Sophia, now 15, stood beside him, having spent the summer volunteering to get the center ready. "Do you think Miss Eleanor would like it?" Sophia asked. Michael looked at the building, at the people gathered to celebrate, at the community that had come together to honor one woman's legacy of kindness. "I think she'd say it was too much fuss over one umbrella," Michael said with a smile. "But yes, I think she'd love it, almost as much as she loved you." That evening, as a light rain began to fall, Michael and Sophia walked home under the umbrella Eleanor had left them. It was worn now, the fabric faded, one of the ribs slightly bent. Michael had been offered new umbrellas dozens of times over the years, but he always refused. "Why do we keep this old umbrella, Dad?" Sophia asked. "It barely works anymore." Michael looked at his daughter, seeing so much of Eleanor's wisdom in her eyes despite her young age. "Because it reminds me that the smallest gestures can change everything, that kindness is never wasted, that one moment of caring about a stranger can ripple outward in ways we can't imagine." "Like throwing a stone in a pond," Sophia said, remembering one of Eleanor's favorite sayings. "Exactly like that. We don't always see where the ripples go, but they go somewhere. They always matter." As they reached their apartment, the building Eleanor had left them, Sophia paused. "Dad, can I start volunteering at the community center, teaching kids to read like Miss Eleanor taught me?" Michael pulled his daughter close, feeling Eleanor's presence in the question, in the desire to pass kindness forward. "She'd love that," he said, "and so would I." Inside, they hung the old umbrella by the door, where it had hung since Eleanor's death. A reminder, a talisman, a symbol of everything that had grown from one simple act of kindness on a rainy Seattle afternoon. Because that's what kindness does. It shelters. It protects. It transforms. One small gesture at a time, one life at a time, building something beautiful from the ordinary grace of seeing another person's need and choosing to help, without asking what you'll get in return, without measuring the cost, just extending the umbrella and saying, "You look like you could use this more than I do." That's how lives change. That's how families are built. That's how small acts of kindness echo forward into forever. If this story of simple kindness and chosen family moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales of ordinary grace and extraordinary impact. Comment below about a small act of kindness that changed your life, or about someone who became family through choice rather than blood. Your story might be the umbrella someone else needs today.